and how they simply don't interact amongst one another. So you do listen on occasion. Very funny. Amy narrowed her eyes. My mother has arranged for an old family friend, the Countess of Brexton, to host me at her house and be my chaperone for the 6-week trip. She lives in Mayfair, which I believe is nowhere near where you grew up. The West End of London was indeed well beyond the area Evie had lived. It was for the wealthy aristocracy, not for the penniless orphan Evie had been, along with her spinster aunt, who had darned clothes for a living. No, it isn't. See? Amy exclaimed. You will be fine staying with the Countess in my place. She's never met me before and wouldn't have met you, so she'll have no idea that it's you taking my place instead of me. I am not switching places with you. Amy grabbed both of Evie's hands and squeezed them. This is the only chance I'll ever get to work for my father's company in your place. You know it's my absolute dream to prove to him I'll be a worthy successor to take over the family business. As capable as you are, and as wonderfully modern as your father is when it comes to his support for women's rights, he's never going to believe a female can run his business empire. She gently squeezed Amy's hands back, and then let go of them. For a moment her cousin appeared despondent, but then the usual glint of determination and enthusiasm was back in her gaze. That is only because he hasn't given me a chance to prove myself, Amy replied with a smile. Once I switch places with you and train as a secretary at the company's London headquarters, I'll learn so much of the inner workings of the company, and when my father discovers all I've learned, he'll change his mind and mentor me, as I've always wanted him to. When your father discovers you've switched places with me, not that I'm agreeing to switch places, but for argument's sake, if I did, and he found out, he would be beyond furious, Evie replied. He'd probably send you to a convent for one escapade too many. Though her uncle was a kind man, he was formidable when it came to business, and Evie doubted he'd be at all impressed that the 6-week secretary traineeship he'd arranged for Evie upon her accompanying Amy to London was in fact undertaken by his daughter instead of his niece. Not impressed would be a mild way to describe what Uncle Thomas's reaction would be. You know my father adores me, Amy shrugged. He wouldn't be mad for too long. You may have him wrapped around your pinky finger and can normally sweet-talk him out of his tempers with you, but I doubt you'd be able to do so as easily again after such a deception as the one you're suggesting. Not to mention your mother would be apoplectic. You hadn't been introduced to the bachelors of London, as she's arranged for you to be. Her Aunt Edith had spent months planning for the trip, only to have slipped from her carriage in the rain and broken her leg a few days ago, preventing her from travelling with Amy to London as she'd intended, which was why Evie was now in the predicament of having to say no to her determined cousin. Aunt Edith had been resolved Amy should still go on her trip, and had requested Evie to accompany Amy to London on the steamer as her companion. They'd then arranged for Evie to stay with a Mrs. Holbrook, the company's London secretary, who would not only host Evie at her residence, but would take her each day to the company and train her to be a secretary too. Her aunt and uncle thought they were helping Evie with such an arrangement, unaware that being a secretary was far from what Evie would choose to do, if she could. But in Evie's position, she'd been unable to say no, especially not after all the kindness her uncle and aunt had shown her in the 6 years she'd been living with them. So regardless of the fact she had no interest whatsoever in learning to be a secretary, she would do so as it would please her family. That's if her cousin was going to let her, for as soon as Amy had heard her parents had arranged such a thing for Evie, she'd come up with this grand plan of hers. I've argued literally day and night with my mother over her plans for me to go to London. I've begged her not to go, to no avail, even though I have absolutely no intention of being a dollar princess and trading in my inheritance for a marriage to an English gentleman with a title, regardless of that seeming to be my mother's sole ambition at the moment. She wants the best for you. As dogmatic as Aunt Edith was about the matter, she did want the best for her daughter. Evie was sure of it. Even if what she thinks is best isn't the same as your idea on the subject. You know the very thought of marriage, let alone to a staid, stuffy Englishman, having to live in such a dreary, rain-drenched, smoggy place as London, is the most horrible, intolerable future I could ever imagine. Amy's whole body shuddered. I wouldn't survive in such an environment. The life would literally be sucked out of me. Amy was always a touch dramatic, but Evie had become accustomed to it over the years. Americans were, after all,